Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Thursday, April 15th, 2021. Yes, Bill in Portland, Maine reminds us that I'll remind you about that today is not tax day. It's not tax day anymore because, COVID something? I know they did that last year. Are we doing it again this year? I have some vague memory that we weren't under such tremendous pressure this time to get everything filed, so I can imagine that they've done it. It says here, it says that it's been moved to May 17th, thanks to my tireless lobbying. In fact, all true. You can thank me for it, I guess, if it's true. And if it's not true, let's all thank me for it anyway, I guess. Why not? I like to get thanked. Sure. Why not? You're welcome, America. It says so right here in Bill's morning tweet. Is it May 17th? It probably is. I was lobbying so tirelessly that I forgot to write it down on the calendar that I did it or something like that. I think that's probably true. All right, lots to catch up on, including like when your taxes are due. It has that feeling, though, right? I mean, I haven't seen people, for one thing, I don't see people all over Twitter moaning and groaning about it, or moaning and groaning about people who are moaning and groaning about it. Like, let's get with it already, pay your fair share. No pictures of people lining up at post offices, etc., etc. Or as I like to call them, drop boxes for filing your federal income tax paperwork. Something that I guess Republicans are against. They don't want, they'll probably wear that proudly. We don't want anyone paying taxes. If by anyone you mean me, and everyone else can, of course, go to hell. All right. Speaking of which, let's see. Lots of interesting stories circulating this morning on Twitter. I know Greg has some more vaccine information lined up. One of the earlier messages admonishing that, I don't know, admonishing is really the right word, but forewarning me that we would be doing some vaccine discussion. But of course, that's top of mind for most people anyway. It turns out also that a address to a joint session of Congress from President Joe Biden. You're aware that Joe Biden is the president, right? I know things are really low key and everything. And I know you're aware that the crazy former guy isn't tweeting, but you're aware that, there's an actual president and he's in charge of things, even though he's not doing crazy tweets, right? Okay. Well, he'll be speaking to a joint session of Congress. I say it that way because, as you know, from long experience, listening to the show, etc., it is not a State of the Union address in the first year of a new presidency. It's simply an invitation to address a joint session of Congress. And it's coming rather late in view of the way we've done things in recent years. Ordinarily, we tend to expect to hear from the president, State of the Union or not, in February. But the transition from, hey, we almost had an insurrection overthrow the United States government, to also we're in the middle of a pandemic, etc., etc., okay. Things got delayed. And so it's coming on April 28th, which is in just under, I think, 2 weeks from now. I know because I've been trying to schedule a meeting with people, getting 10 people to agree on a date and time for a Zoom meeting, and we got everybody pretty much signed on to it, at which point they announced that this thing would be happening on the 28th. If they follow with tradition and start things at 9 o'clock, I think I can get my meeting over and done with. I don't really know if anybody's watching it. You know me, I won't. But the rest of you people who are interested in what's going on in the country and what it means, you'll probably want to pay attention. It's exciting. We've replaced the former guy idiot with somebody who knows what they're doing and is saving us from the pandemic, if it's possible to save us from the pandemic. Now that I see all sorts of polling, I think they're up to like 45% of self-identified Republicans now saying that they would somehow refuse the vaccine. So, it may be with us for a long time. It's almost as if it had been engineered by, external enemies of the country, hoping that the United States, despite its advantage in developing vaccines and distributing vaccines would somehow shoot itself in the foot and remain hobbled by the pandemic for, well, maybe for eternity. And if it hangs around long enough, maybe it just starts circulating and recirculating annually like the flu under different forms. And we're all chasing booster shots every year. And all of these wonderful locations for mass vaccination clinics have to stay open as mass vaccination clinics. How exciting would that be? Okay, let's see. Other fun news from around the country. I see word from Florida that, like in many states, the Republican-controlled state legislatures are on a hunt to single out and embarrass transgender youth for wanting to participate in sports. There's all sorts of issues that circulate around them, and as usual, there's the germ of an idea in there somewhere that things ought to be fair in high school competition, but it's now reaching the level of, well, pretty much exactly where you thought it was going to land. And I have a feeling like we've been here before, but this time, apparently, a bill making it through the Florida State House, where our good friend Matt Gaetz used to serve, but current Representative Omari Hardy tweeting today, "We gave everything we had to give. We reasoned. We shouted." Well, that's your problem. "We pleaded. We cried. We broke down and left the House floor." You should have sacked the Capitol. That's the only respectable way to make your voice heard. But today, Florida Republicans passed a bill not only banning trans kids from playing sports, but subjecting kids whose sex may be disputed to genital inspections. Sounds fantastic. We should probably get to the bottom of that before they try to get to your bottom. Anyway, the former colleagues of Matt Gaetz, who apparently had nothing to say to anybody until it was too late about how he was showing naked pictures of possibly teenage kids on the House floor there, and continues to do that while serving in Congress now. Matt Gaetz's curiously mum former colleagues mandating teenage genital inspections. Nothing to see here, everybody. Just walk away and let Republicans be Republicans. It's a message we ought to carry forward, that these had an impact on these people, and now they're mandating their ability to reach into your teenager's pants and check them out. Fantastic. Nothing like a state-mandated molestation bill. Well, not much more you can expect out of the Florida legislature. Way to go down there, everybody. Not like we're immune from it either. Happened to see this morning that here in Virginia, I guess we're getting ready for a gubernatorial primary very soon. Of course, it's the same gubernatorial primary over and over again, because apparently Terry McAuliffe is running in the Democratic primary, and I guess very likely to even possibly win, but there are challengers. But I'm actually thinking about the Republican primary, not because I'm interested in it, but because mostly because I'm interested in making sure that our own Donald Trump-y person, sort of our own Marjorie Taylor Greene, really, doesn't make it through the primary. And I guess Amanda Chase, State Senator Amanda Chase, already anticipating losing that primary, probably overwhelmingly, by circulating flyers and paid promotional material, already accusing the Republican Party of Virginia of rigging the race, and announcing for all to hear that if her opponent, Pete Snyder, is declared the victor, then it will be, de facto, fake news. They will have stolen, using those words, stolen the election for him. Already, her latest email headlined, "Breaking, Pete Snyder Steals Election." So I'm sure we'll all be proud of the outcome of the Republican primary, and Republicans will step up and take responsibility, maybe, and prevent this from happening, but probably not. All right. So that's a quick roundup of only some of the disasters in the making from Republican hands. There's always plenty of that. But first, Greg Dworkin, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. We're good.
Okay, that's good.
I have a lingering bit of laryngitis due to the seasonal allergies that, Bill Clinton had that problem too.
Oh, yeah?
So it happens every year, and I'm anxious and awaiting for it to go away.
He was allergic to silence, Bill Clinton.
Yeah. So I was going to put Abby on the show. As you know from yesterday, she's trilingual. She speaks Dalmatian. She speaks Pointer, and she also speaks Labrador. Now, I don't speak Dalmatian, so I didn't quite understand what she was saying yesterday at the end of the show, but apparently, yes, the sanitation engineers did come, and that's exactly why she was, happy about it. It's Wednesday. These things happen on Wednesday about 9:50, and it's good to set your clock by it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't even know. Are you from Dalmatia? Is that how you learned to speak it?
It's the one I don't speak.
Okay. I'm sorry. I got that backwards.
Labrador I do.
Oh, okay. Well, you can be from Labrador.
Pointer is easy because
you can be from Dalmatia, which is now in Croatia, which rhymes.
Yeah, well, that's this week.
Yes. All right, I know. Check back again in a couple weeks, and it could be from a totally different country.
Right. They redistrict there all the time.
They got to stop gerrymandering the Balkans. That's the issue.
That's the issue. So a lot happened on the vaccine front yesterday, and I think a lot of it was important, and some of it just happened. But it's just fascinating watching the change, if you will, the whole tenor of discussion, which started, with, oh my gosh, they're holding the J&J vaccine. We have a press release, and then there's going to be a news conference. And they did all of that, and then the meeting wasn't going to be Tuesday when they announced all of this. The meeting was going to be Wednesday, which it was. And so now we have the reaction to Wednesday. It's a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more subtle than it initially appeared. The good news is that there's New England Journal of Medicine data from Israel about the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine. 2 doses of Pfizer vaccine gives greater protection than 1, maybe.
Yes.
Effectiveness against symptomatic COVID was 57% after 1 dose, 94% after 2. For severe disease, 94. It was 62% after 1, 92% after 2. Nice. C. Michael Gibson, the cardiologist, says it supports using vaccine as studied in trials, but it doesn't really, because you can't, based on this, separate the difference between, okay, I got the first shot, and then a month later, it was working even better, versus I got my first shot, and then a month later, I got my second shot. All they know is after 6 weeks, you look great. Okay. Was it entirely due to the first shot, and it just took 6 weeks, or was it due to the second booster? We don't know. But the takeaway is it works.
Okay.
So for all of the Alex Berensons and other people, I like Tucker Carlson, who say, well, there's no proof it works. Actually, there's proof it works.
Yeah, they really ought to. Well, yeah, we have a real problem with them doing that.
Okay, so that's where that happens. We have increasing numbers in the United States. So that's the background behind the meeting yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe Ashish Jha summarized what's going on here. He says the initial, he's the dean of the School of Public Health at Brown.
I remember
Initial pause by the FDA on Tuesday was a close call, but I supported it, he says. So did I. I thought it was reasonable. A few days to alert. I didn't think it was a disaster. It was a terrible thing that clots happened, but I think the FDA did the right thing. A few days to alert people, begin process of collecting more data, advise physicians. That all made sense. Now the advisory panel wants to return in 7 to 10 days to discuss further, and that risk-benefit is all wrong. Based on the panel's finding yesterday, nearly all the adverse events are in women 18 to 49 years old. The reason he says nearly all is because, really interesting, yesterday was a 25-year-old dude in the trial who developed a cerebral vascular sinus thrombosis, that is to say, a blood clot in the brain with the veins draining the brain. And that was after 8 days of the vaccine. So J&J representative says it was retrospectively determined he was negative for the anti-platelet factor 4 antibodies before vaccination and positive after. So one of the things that they were able to establish with this meeting, bringing all the data together, is that generally speaking, the people who develop clots develop these antibodies. And so therefore, there is a mechanism for what happened. And it seems to be associated with the adenovirus vector vaccines, which is to say AstraZeneca and J&J, and not the mRNA vaccines. There was no evidence at all that that was an issue, and that would be Pfizer and Moderna. So that part was established, and taking a moment to do that was really a good thing. And so we're very happy that that happened. Now, Jessica Pickett had the best short summary of everything that happened in the meeting. Extending the pause for 7 to 10 days when they'll reconvene for a more structured risk-benefit assessment on the expectation that significantly more cases will come to light, but recognizing they need to vote regardless.
Okay.
So for those people who are correctly saying, well, they punted and didn't make a decision, they can't do that forever. And in fact, they want to take a week. Ashish Jha is saying maybe a week's too long. Lots of people are saying that. James Sarawicki is saying that on Twitter as well. Maybe it's enough. Maybe it's not enough. So that's controversial. And that's what happens when the experts disagree. Somebody's going to have to make a decision, and the decision will be made by the FDA. So Jessica Pickett writes, it sounded to me, because this is a public call. Even Del Bigtree, the anti-vax person, called in. It sounded to me like the work group came to the table anticipating an age-based recommendation, or at most extending the pause for a narrower subpopulation, but a vocal minority disagreed. And to be fair, the 8 cases identified now include a 25-year-old man and a 59-year-old woman.
Yes, dude, as you said before.
So you can't just say, okay, well, why don't you just restrict it to women over 50, under 50? And the answer is because one woman was over 50 and another woman wasn't a woman.
Yeah.
So that's why. So that's what they're
addressing. Yeah.
The overall tenor of the discussion implied that even more uncertainty-averse members are primarily concerned about accurately pinning down the relevant risk factors in affected populations. I'll give you an example. Some of the people were very worried about waiting because the people they had designated for the J&J vaccine were people in the hospital who they had available. And so these are high-risk people, and they wanted to get them vaccinated. But those very same high-risk people also have a lot of comorbidities. And it wasn't clear from the meeting yesterday whether specific comorbidities, clotting factors in the past and such, were part of what you need to look for. People noticed, not necessarily at this meeting, but there were some very erudite discussions about this online, that the kinds of blood clots that you see from birth control pills in pregnancy are far more common than this one, but they're also different.
Okay.
And so it's not at all clear that they're related, for example. Only one of the patients they identified was on hormonal therapy. And so it's not clear that that's a risk factor. But because it's not clear, that's one of the reasons why some of the members wanted to take a little bit more time. Okay. I do think it's noteworthy, Jessica Pickett says, that neither preferential recommendation nor shared clinical decision-making was invoked in the menu of policy options. That is to say, they weren't going to dump it and say, okay, it's up to your doctor.
Okay.
That's what shared clinical decision-making. We don't know. Talk about it with your doctor.
Leave it to the states.
But shared clinical decision-making sounds so much more,
Sure.
Fancy term.
Yeah.
One of the $5 words,
Right. Wow.
Full presentation slides are posted online for those interested in digging into the currently available data, and they were compiled in less than 48 hours, so there's some minor discrepancies, but links are available.
Okay.
So a longer and excellent overview was done by Kai Coopersmith, one of our best science journalists.
Oh.
And he gives examples of case reports. Right. For example, a healthy 25-year-old male vaccinated on September 21st, 8 days post-vaccination, feeling progressively unwell, fatigue, faintness, nausea, headache, took non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, like Motrin. 11 days post-vaccination, continued fatigue, weakness, nausea, developed abdominal pain and headache. And one of the takeaways to give to clinicians is if you have severe headache, abdominal pain, leg pain, shortness of breath, these are the findings, if you've had the J&J within a couple of weeks, that you should see a doctor about. And then they had a big laboratory evaluation, and that's when they found those antibodies. One of the members noted that most hospitals aren't equipped to look for those antibodies, so it's not like, the hospitals can just screen for it. They can't. They're not ready. They're not set up.
More tests we have to make and send to hospitals. Okay.
Yeah. So again, that's one of the things that requires time. And just trying to give you a flavor of why can't you just make a decision? It should be easy. We need this vaccine. End of story. Well, it's more complicated than that, although that may ultimately be the decision and the right, decision-making process.
Why can't you just make more doctors?
Or
that's
less.
Complicated too. Yeah.
Okay. So at least 5 of the patients out of 6 had the antibody. The comparison of cases in terms of The reporting ratio, or how often these things happened, was way over what you would expect for cases in women aged 20 to 50. And there was a lot of criticism yesterday, says Kai Cooper-Smith, about the decision to do the pause. But after following essentially the same debate in Europe on AstraZeneca for a month now, this meeting is next level in terms of transparency. We need a lot more of this. So it was clear. They stated their reasons. It was public. Everybody could listen. Even the anti-vaxxers could call in and complain. So that part of it was really, really good. So what was known so far? Thrombocytopenic, that is to say low platelet, thrombotic, that is to say blood clots, events after AstraZeneca have occurred. In the U.S., 6 cases of cerebrovascular sinus thrombosis reported after receipt of J&J. No cases of cerebrovascular sinus thrombosis, that's CVST, with thrombocytopenia, low platelets, reported after Pfizer or Moderna. So it's only J&J. That's been established. CVST cases have occurred primarily in younger adults and females and can be clinically devastating or fatal. In the U.S., alternative vaccines are available, and based on current projections, supply of both the mRNA vaccines are fairly stable for the near future. So lack of the J&J really shouldn't set everything back, with the exception of those who clearly planned for J&J and had everything set up and then had to pull back. Yes, that should be fixed relatively quickly, but no question we have to acknowledge the pain in the neck that turned out to be. What we don't know, remember Tony Fauci's, here's what we do know, here's what we don't know. Okay. So what we don't know, true background incidence of cerebrovascular sinus thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. These cases are different than the blood clots you get from birth control pills or pregnancy or the general overall blood clots in the population. And a lot of people get blood clots that are not clinically significant. You can find them, but you don't need to treat them. And so they sort of don't count.
Okay.
That's why looking at the background incidence, you have to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So the true background incidence, it's rare. It's very rare. And that means that, in the end, some level of going forward with the vaccine will probably happen. Specific risk factors for thrombocytopenic thrombotic events. That is to say, if you have this case where you're getting clots but with low platelets, are there specific risk factors we need to know so that we do not give the J&J to those people? We don't know what they are yet, and that's the main reason why they want to delay making a decision.
All right. That's what my son wants to know.
Yeah. Incidence of other thrombotic non-CVST cases with thrombocytopenia after the Janssen vaccine. And I got an article for your son, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
In the Wall Street Journal about, trying to do this risk assessment properly. He'd enjoy it, being the economist that he is.
Yeah. If he's
Incidence of other thrombotic non-CVST cases with thrombocytopenia after the Janssen vaccine, which is the J&J. Ability to compare or generalize thrombotic cases after both AstraZeneca and J&J. True incidence of this after the vaccine, and more cases may be identified in the coming days or weeks. In fact, they expect more cases to be identified. That was another reason for the pause. They wanted to collect more data, and they figured actually more data will happen.
Okay, that means more people get these.
And more people, right. Okay. So the decision's not to vote on any changes in the recommendations today, which is yesterday, and continue the pause while more data is gathered, and then to meet again in a week to 10 days. Technically, they're simply not making a recommendation to the CDC director. Now, Celine Gounder, who is a epidemiologist, infectious disease at NYU, also a CNN contributor, had a very long thread about sort of the things that happened, putting in context, regular, if you will, regular order blood clots, as opposed to these privileged motion blood clots, which are different, So it's common and normal for people to experience headache, fatigue, fevers, chills, and muscle pain in the first couple of days after vaccination. Right. But if somebody has headache, abdominal pain, leg pain, or shortness of breath 1 or 2 weeks after, that's cause for concern. Clinicians should screen them for blood clots. And we as healthcare providers, when we care for a patient with a blood clot, the first drug we usually reach for is heparin. Absolutely wrong thing to do in this case, which is why the pause was important. We talked about that yesterday.
Yes, that was very interesting.
Okay. Secondly, it's essential that the FDA and CDC prove themselves to be trustworthy. Worries about vaccine safety and efficacy and a lack of trust in the health system drive low confidence in vaccines. So FDA and CDC have to demonstrate to the public they're taking seriously the risk They may conclude that the vaccine's safe and may recommend lifting the pause. They also may recommend restricting the use to men and older adults, similar to restrictions on AZ in Europe. And they're looking at the very rare cases of blood clots here. Either way, use of the J&J vaccine may fizzle out in this country. Some saw the J&J vaccine being inferior anyway, with lower efficacy against infection and milder disease in clinical trials. We were seeing that beforehand, even before this all happened. Well, I'm Team Pfizer. I'm Team Moderna. Well, I'm J&J because I really like the data and I want to get one and done. But it's important to note J&J was studied in South Africa and Latin America when the B1351 and P1 variants were already widespread, and that's one of the reasons why the so-called efficacy data is different. And it's not really possible to compare one vaccine to another without specifically doing head-to-head studies, which haven't been done. In this study, it looks like this. In that study, it looks like that. In this third study for the third vaccine, it looks like this. None of those are head-to-head comparison using the same population and the same parameters.
This I remember. Okay.
So we're fortunate in this country to have multiple highly effective COVID vaccines at our disposal and an ample supply. What worries her, Celine Gounder, is what this will mean for the global COVID vaccine supply. We were counting on AstraZeneca and J&J, right?
Yes.
And so the vaccine supply won't come in time to vaccinate Americans, but it's essential to the global vaccine effort. So that's a story from yesterday. Still a pause, much more controversial because some people think that they shouldn't take a week. Just take a few days, make a decision, and go. And we'll see what happens because that might be what happens anyway. This group can be overruled.
Okay. Well, it's important to know the rules.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, it's just like you can fire a parliamentarian here and do something different.
Because the FDA has the gavel. I'm just trying to make it relatable to you politics.
Now it does make sense to me. Okay, thanks. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, more information typing away. Thanks, Greg. Send that. Send this to my son. Wall Street Journal. I'll have to make sure he's paid up for that one. But is it one of the ones they're making free because it's about COVID? I don't know.
I hope so. We'll see. This one is from the Wall Street Journal. CDC identifies only 5,800 COVID infections after the final vaccine out of more than 66 million. And those who got it had mild cases. So does it protect you? Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Can you still get sick? Yes, but it's really, really vanishing small number.
Right. So
that's the background. With the cases rising, we have to this whole discussion about what's going on with the J&J. So I hope that clears up a little bit about what happened yesterday and where we go from here. We're now basically waiting for them to reconvene. We want it to be soon, and pressure's going to be rising on them to make it 7 days, not 10 or 17 or 23 or whatever. And what'll be interesting is whether or not the FDA says, you know what, we have enough information. What we're going to do is issue interim guidelines, and we're going to go through this anyway because it's so important that people have it. What gives me pause about doing that, though, is not identifying yet comorbidities, that is to say other conditions that you have. Everybody now knows about comorbidities through this Derek Chauvin trial. Comorbidities may not be the thing that do you in, but if they're a coexisting condition, they can influence what happens. And if that's the case, it'd be nice to identify which ones we really have to watch out for. So keep an eye on that. But I think the takeaway message here is that the experts aren't in full agreement. When that happens, somebody has to make a decision anyway, but they're not stupid. They're not innumerate. They know what risk factors are involved here. They know this risk benefit ratios here to look at. They know the public needs this. They know the public wants it. They're being transparent. I tend to agree with Dr. Shah. I was definitely 100% for the first pause. Made total sense to me for reasons explained. The second pause, I wish they had just made a decision, but I understand why they didn't. So that being the case, they better get their act together real soon.
Okay, so take your pause, but not for too long. Everyone's waiting.
Right.
All
So
easy.
Let's go to politics. And our friend Rebecca Roman's right in time.
Oh.
Gives us some new polling. That was going to be our next thing, but just hot off the track from Navigator Survey. Support for Biden's American Jobs Plan, 51, opposed 19.
That's low.
Support for Biden's American Jobs Plan, once they hear what's in it. Support 70.
Blind support. Bah! All right.
And 63% with independents, opposed 19. 13% with independents. 19% opposed it without hearing about it. Now they hear about it, 19% opposed.
Well, they were set in their ways.
Right? Sounds good to me. What's in it? Oh, I really like it. So it's a very popular plan. And hey, that's not the only polling. Yesterday we talked about political playbook. Voters say if we like it, it's infrastructure.
Yes,
right? We talked about that yesterday. But Quinnipiac was out, 64% support increasing corporate taxes, 64% support increasing taxes on those making greater than $400,000. So everything about what Biden is doing is popular. This is also new from New York Times. Partisan breakdown, interesting. Do you approve or disapprove of the American Jobs Plan? Total 64. Democrats 97, Independents 72, Republicans 29. That makes it bipartisan. Remember, bipartisan in Washington is if one Republican votes with you.
Yes.
What, 29% of Republicans were opposed to everything Democrats do? That's pretty good.
Okay. Somebody does it. It doesn't say anywhere that it has to be an elected member of Congress agreeing with you to make it bipartisan.
Any more than it says that the Speaker has to be a member of the House of Representatives.
That's right.
Know your rules.
Yeah, right. I mean, we ought to start using that. It would be very exciting. It's bipartisan.
Monmouth yesterday, 1 in 5 still shun the vaccine, a little bit more relevant to what we were talking about. Biden gets high marks for COVID response. He gets various levels of various things. He has a job rating of 54%. Last month it was 51. The president gets a 95% approval from Democrats. Every single poll says 95 to 98% of Democrats are happy with what he's doing. For all of those of you who remember the primaries.
Yes. Right. Well, anybody who remembers the former guy is happy with what this one's doing.
Well, as people have pointed out, and John Harwood was the first one that I saw, the Democratic approval of Biden is way higher than Republican approval of Trump ever was.
Is that so? Yeah. I mean, he'd claim otherwise.
But Trump would hit 90-91. Biden is hitting 95 to 98.
Yeah, he was proud of that, too. Look, 91%.
Nobody's ever gotten that before.
That's true, right. It's world record breaking.
Now it's 97-98. Where were you? So this is Philip Bump. Republican vaccine resistance remains stubborn. Patrick Murray, director of the Monmouth poll, made the point flatly when releasing new data showing that 21% of Americans say they'll probably never get vaccinated. The number of people who have been skittish about the vaccine has dropped as more Americans line up for the shot, but the hardcore group who want to avoid it at all costs has barely budged. And that assessment isn't only Monmouth's. Polling conducted by YouGov finds something similar since October. The percentage of people saying they're not sure if they'll get vaccinated has dropped from 33 to 16, cut in half. The percentage reporting they either will be or have been has climbed, but those who say they won't get it, flat. Again, these are white evangelicals.
All right.
We know that from other data. And so the best way to get those folks vaccinated is convince their pastors. Good luck with that.
Yes, well, it might be difficult.
Right. It's going to be very, very hard. So that's background to all of this. And interestingly, while all this is happening, okay, there's two articles, companion pieces here I haven't given you that I was looking at, kind of scratching my head about. First one is from New York Times. Shades of 2016, Republicans stay silent on Trump, hoping he fades away. And they're talking about how there's optimism within the Republican Party that he's simply not as popular as he used to be. And if you just let things go the way they're going, he'll continue to fade. Now, it was wishful thinking during the primaries, this article points out. Still, Trump does not have the complete control over the party he did during 4 years in office, it says. His critics include leading Republicans like McConnell, and Representative Liz Cheney yesterday was asked if she would vote for Trump if he ran again, and Cheney said no. Well, she's just about the only person who flat out said no, and you need more of those. I hate, as many people pointed out on Twitter, I hate her politics. I hate everything about what she stands for. I love this.
Yes. Well, if you want to diminish it in any way, shape, or form, but still accept the results of it, she's establishing a lane for herself. This is the way we discussed the Democratic primary last time around.
She's paving a new lane.
So, okay. Very good. I mean, I like that lane. I don't like who's driving in it, but it's a good lane.
Other Republicans are privately hopeful that the criminal investigation into Mr. Trump's business by the New York District Attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., will result in charges that hobble him. People who have spoken with Mr. Trump say he's agitated about the investigation. While all that may represent just a slow turn away, these Republicans believe the turn has begun. Of course, David Koshel, a Republican strategist and supporter of Mr. Bush during the 2016 campaign, sounded less optimistic. Even January 6th didn't break the hold on the party.
Okay.
And as long as you have Fox News at night being anti-vax and pro-insurrection, it's going to be a problem, just so you know.
Yeah, they should ban them from Twitter.
Don't have the politicians go tell the people who don't want to get vaccinated not to get vaccinated. Tell Tucker Carlson, tell the preachers. These are the people that have influence, not Trump. It's not the politicians.
Yes. By the way, I would say 75% chance Tucker Carlson's been vaccinated, but will just lie.
Well, somebody should ask him in any case.
Yeah.
How do you deal with all of this? It turns out that what Democrats are doing is really popular, and what Republicans are doing isn't, and Trump isn't particularly popular, except with his own base, and his own base is nuts. So what do you do with that? Enter ex-traffic control problem guy Chris Christie.
Oh, okay.
In Real Clear Politics, he actually shows up behind the scenes explaining to Republicans how they should deal with a very popular Joe Biden.
No.
Just say he lies.
Oh, all right, sure.
Right?
I mean,
this is what you have to do. You have to show you're a fighter.
That's not great advice. I mean, it might work, but I hope
Republicans haven't conducted an autopsy as they did after Barack Obama won a second term.
Right.
There's no official document in the basement of the Republican National Committee detailing all the missteps that lost them the presidency, says Real Clear Politics. On Wednesday, Christie seemed to say there was no need. We didn't lose the White House because the American people disagree with our ideas and support what Democrats are trying to do right now, he admitted. Of course, I just read you that's wrong.
Yeah. Well.
We know why he lost. We know why he lost, and so does President Trump. I told the president 131 days out, if you don't knock off some of the crazy stuff, your behavior is going to obscure your accomplishments. If this becomes an election for student council, we don't win because he doesn't offend anybody as a category. Goes back to what we said yesterday. They're really mad because it's really hard to lay a glove on Joe Biden.
I guess.
Because the professional assassins are just having trouble with it.
Well,
Trump didn't listen, says the article. Uncle Joe, the nice guy, won. And now Republicans are struggling to combat the president they couldn't define as a candidate. The Christie prescription is to call out the new White House on the details of policy to apply the Trump-era rules to the Biden presidency and make this a 4-year mistake. If the GOP adopts a strong, consistent message of strength without recklessness, we can win back the White House.
Yeah, if they do that, although he started out by describing his plan, which was, well, just lie about what's happening in the White House. That's not the same thing, of course, as having a debate on policy. That's just lying.
So let's talk about policy. So here's the quote. We didn't lose the White House because the American people disagree with our ideas and support what Democrats are trying to do right now, Chris Christie admitted.
No, that's wrong.
We know why we lost. We know why we lost, and so does President Trump. That's what he said.
Right.
Politico Morning Counsel poll from April 2nd through 4. Yeah. Who do you trust more? Climate change, Democrats plus 31. Environment, Democrats plus 29. Coronavirus, Democrats plus 25. Protecting Social Security, Medicare, Democrats plus 20. Healthcare, Democrats plus 19. Education, Democrats plus 18. Voting rights, Democrats plus 16. The economy, Democrats plus 5. Gun policy, Democrats plus 5. Immigration, Democrats plus 4. National security, even. Remember.
Okay. So you wrong.
People don't support what Democrats are doing. Well, actually,
Here
they do.
Yeah. Of course, the idea that people didn't vote for us.
The two big bills are incredibly popular, as we talked about.
And they have everything in it, all those things. And, they did lose the election because people don't like their ideas. Not only do they like Democratic ideas, but the thing that drove people to vote against Republicans in the presidential race was, I don't like the things that he says. And the things that he says are supposed to be policy. The fact that they're tainted with personal attacks is just an added bonus to make more people not like them, I guess. But yeah, Chris Christie saying, I told the president 130 days out. This president has never listened to you from the beginning. I don't know why you continue to think he'll listen to you this time. He hired you and fired you within minutes, and he's not interested in what you have to say. But okay, I know, he's not really advising Trump. He's just needs to be seen as someone whose advice is to be listened to, so he'll get interviewed. And all right, he wants to run. Big deal.
Right.
Okay.
Now, here's how Mitch McConnell is handling the nitty-gritty of policy preferences and trying to get it passed on the Hill. Yeah. This is from Burgess Everett in Politico. Mitch McConnell had an unusual request for Senate Republicans at Tuesday lunch. Say nice things about Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema.
Oh, okay. So wooing them, I guess.
A look at the GOP campaign to woo the two centrist Dems and keep them away from hitting the filibuster. McConnell told Senate Republicans Sinema and Manchin will come under tons of pressure, and the GOP needs to keep them as close as they can. It's nice there are Democrats left who respect the institution, don't want to destroy the essence of the Senate, he said.
Sure.
John Thune, the GOP whip, talks to both frequently and hangs out with them outside the Senate occasionally. They're almost guardians of democracy because they're trying to protect us from the loss of the legislative filibuster, and everything would come with that. I mean, he practically said, and I can see angels sitting on their shoulders. And then there's the devil on the other shoulder, and they keep whispering in each ear, and we got to win.
Yeah. All right. Well, they don't really, feel that way. They just think, all right, well, again, we sow more chaos. The good play here is make it look like we're courting them because there's a solid belief that they'll switch parties, even if that's
or something,
the case.
At least on this. So Burgess Everett asked Manchin about the GOP praise. He wants to see some give from the Republicans. They just hope they help me.
Okay.
And Sinema spokesman said she believes the best way to achieve lasting results is bipartisan negotiations. Now, Sinema's working with and talking to Cornyn on an immigration bill, Romney on minimum wage, and Shelley Moore Capito on infrastructure.
Okay.
Capito's the one that wants only 800
billion.
Billion, trillion,
gazillion,
Brazilian.
Yeah.
And it's less than half of what Democrats need, and also doesn't want any frills in it, like helping people. Right. Manchin wants bipartisan infrastructure bill, opposes S1 as written. That would be the Voting Rights for the People Act.
Yes. Okay.
And does not support 28% corporate income tax. Both want to keep the filibuster. So we'll see if they get any movement from their Republican colleagues. Give them time. Fine. Whatever.
Sure, do what you like. I mean, we should be doing the same, but...
in the end, they both voted with the Democrats when it came to COVID relief, and I expect them to do the same here.
Yeah.
But let's see if they can bring anybody on board. And if they want to fiddle with corporate taxes, I don't care. Pass the bill without corporate tax increases. I don't really care. Just pass the bill.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
That's not a hill I'm going to die on.
All right. I think that's okay. Sure, we can come back to it, or not. We don't need the taxes. I learned that.
Right.
Recently. Okay.
Now, the other big thing that's happening, which the J&J and coronavirus and, the general need to do things fast and understand what we're doing debate has obscured, is Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan. And just two interesting pieces here, one on Twitter, one in The New Yorker by Susan B. Glasser. Biden finally got to say no to the generals. Critics be damned, the president's ending the forever war waged by Bush, Obama, and Trump in Afghanistan. Now, somebody else had pointed out, actually, what Biden is doing is he's actually fulfilling all the campaign promises that Trump made but didn't do.
Yes,
he's doing infrastructure, and he's getting out of Afghanistan.
Right. He's not playing in fire trucks.
So you'd think Republicans would be okay with that. And of course, they're Chris Christie Republicans, so they're not, because they don't really care about governance. It's just does our side have an advantage on this or not? Yeah. Only thing we care about.
And that all credit be only for Republicans.
Yeah, exactly right. Or even if we can't get anything done, at least don't give credit to Democrats for actually doing stuff.
Right.
That's the important thing. So Biden did get to say no to the generals. And
no.
The interesting thing here is Lauren DeJong-Schulman, who is an expert analyst with experience in this, says not taking the advice of the military in this decision doesn't mean the military gave bad advice. It's a multi-part equation. Military advice is a single variable. POTUS has to weigh many other factors that the military shouldn't influence. Think of this like what FDA has to decide in regard to all the information they get from the experts on the J&J vaccine. Okay, yes. The reasons for pausing are one of the factors, but it's not the only thing that tells you what to do. So ultimately, somebody has to make a decision. And she says, covering the Afghanistan policy decision, note, the president is not presented with a military option alone to which he says yes or no. He's weighing many factors, politics, alliances, Afghan relations, potential risks, resources, diplomacy, beyond Department of Defense's purview.
Yes.
Right. Lots of coverage presents military options as though the U.S. military is an independent actor that pitches the commander-in-chief on their unasked for favored ideas, advocates loudly for them. That absolutely can happen, but it's not the system norm.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That sort of framing, the military wants to do this, is everywhere in how we talk about defense strategy.
Okay. Yeah, good point.
Now, the officers at the top have preferences and probably state them eventually. But the whole dialogue starts with the president saying, I want to do X. How? That's how it works.
That's that's an important point.
Depending on response with, if you want to do that, it'll take X, Y, or Z with N time. Here are the risks. We think Y is probably the best. Also, the whole rest of your National Security Council and our allies have some more important roles here. So we have to spend more time on them. And the president, because he's commander-in-chief, can say, actually, with that cost and risk, I want to reevaluate whether the original goal is in our interest. This doesn't make the military's advice bad. It doesn't tie them to the preference. It's their role.
Yeah. Hammer, what do you think we should do with these nails?
Yeah. Have past U.S. presidents abused the system by hiding behind the military advice they themselves shape? Sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
My generals. Yeah.
Have they generated options outside the bounds of strategic guidance, used leaks in public forums to build their celebrity case? Yep, 1,000%, 10,000%. Oh. These exceptions make the rule all the more important. It's important that the Biden administration use the system, but that they talk about it this way. It's important that Congress and the press acknowledge this system and don't create head-to-head battles when there aren't any.
Yes.
Okay, exceptions, and again, they exist, many of them, are more important stories with the context of our civilian-military dialogue and norms. That context and norms deserve airing, whether this was the most flat, boring process or the chair-throwing dramatic one.
Yes. Process. Okay, I like it. This is good. Yeah. This is helpful.
I just thought, I'd mention it. We understand, after listening to you for so many years, the whole thing about process and how it's supposed to work and what happens when you follow it and what happens when you're obviously trying to change the system so that you don't have to follow it. Yeah. And if you want to look at an example of changing the system so that you don't have to follow it, just look up the last time a parliamentarian was fired.
Mm-hmm. Yes, true.
That's a situation where you know what you want to do and then you take the steps to do it. That is not the norm.
True. This is a good parallel to it, too. And, also lots of people reminding everybody, well, we did build this structure intentionally so that there would be civilian control of the military. The military has lots to say on subjects that are military in nature, and then you make a decision on how you want to deal with them from a
Which is, by the way,
viewpoint.
A really good reason for why it was a really bad thing for General Milley to be next to Donald Trump as they strolled over to a photo op while clearing the square of protesters on the way.
Yes, and General
Milley exactly
says
what you don't...
he realizes that was a bad idea after the fact, but yes, it worried him because there's real value to keeping them at arm's length on these things. That you get a balanced debate over the policy outcomes. But, for Donald Trump, that doesn't make any sense, and neither does this whole process. None of it worked for Trump, of course. He described the process as basically being the president saying, this is my preferred policy outcome, how do we get there? Versus Donald Trump's thing was, I will just simply announce that as the policy decision on Twitter and not ask input from anybody. And then the whole government has to scramble to make it, well, how do we make it so that the president's not wrong, but we also don't have a nuclear war? That process. So, a little bit of rust that needed to be shaken off of that process. And I guess it's still intact. So good. That's good news. At least he didn't totally destroy it. And right. Some things are beyond his power, after all.
Anyway, that's my contribution for today. I thought both of those angles were kind of interesting. They sort of intertwine. There is a process. And when you follow the process, and the process is at least semi-transparent, more transparent in the case of the FDA, less transparent when it comes to the discussions with the Department of Defense by the president. Those usually aren't broadcast with call-in from the public. But nonetheless, knowing how the process works and reverting back to expecting that to be the norm is on the whole healthy for American society. So that's my message for today. Everybody's anxiously awaiting what the FDA is going to do, as well as what Biden's going to do with Afghanistan. And, of course, the world is not necessarily going to wait for American decisions, so things happen regardless of what we decide. And there you have it. And on Monday, we'll see if we can bring peace to the Middle East through a process. And, what else we could do in our copious spare time. Maybe end world hunger. I mean, these are all important things.
Very true. Okay. And, I'm particularly interested in the way we ended on this thing. But well wrapped up, and a good thing, too, because it's the end of the week for you, right?
Yeah, and the end of my hour. So.
Okay.
You got an hour left. Don't go away, folks, and especially for those of you just tuning in because you like to skip me. David is about to give you an hour's worth of I don't know what.
Dalmatian translation.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think I can work that out. All right, well, thanks for coming, and thanks for pronouncing the names of the various blood clots so easily. It just rolls right off of your well-trained tongue, so I suppose that's easy. It's easy for you to say, I mean, literally.
That's why people use those abbreviations.
Ah, okay.
As I was telling David during the break, I have a lot more trouble with volcanoes in Iceland in terms of pronouncing them properly.
Right. And, they're so proud of themselves that they can pronounce their own native language correctly. I mean, they're not boastful about it. But, every once in a while you see one of those guys brought on TV to show you how to pronounce those things. And we can send our own doctors there to show them how to pronounce these things. When they want to discuss medical difficulties with the vaccines in Iceland. But, they all speak English pretty well there, so maybe they can actually do both. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm from New York, so better than me. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Very good. Thanks for coming by, and we'll look forward to it, except for the fact that would mean the weekend is over. So take your time. How about that? All right. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Abby, for keeping it all to yourself. Does she also have laryngitis? Is that's why... we didn't hear from her, or it's just a calm day around there. I think probably that's it, right? Okay. Very good, Greg. And, she's outside is the answer. All right. Just so you know. And let's see. Where can we turn? Oh, there's other news that I can round up from where? All the various Twitter exhibitions and discussions during the day. Oh, there goes the disconnection sound. All right. No problem. What was the other thing I wanted to bring up that flashed across the Twitter screen this morning? Because we are up against or coming to the next break, I won't dive into any of the longer stories. Yes, right. Kristi Noem, idiot. Thank you. There, I have summarized it, I think, adequately. She, made an appearance on Fox News. Is this, what's her face? The Ingram that she's on with? I can't tell. Or she flashed past the screen too quickly. Anyway, I guess the big headline for her was she came on to give an anti-immigrant screed of some kind, saying that she was going to somehow, I don't know what, powers she's claiming, or pretends she has. But her hard line on immigration was, well, we won't accept illegal immigrants, as she puts it, here in South Dakota, which, I'm not certain she actually has any particular powers to do anything with. I'm sure there are various ways she can tinker at the margins with enforcement, but, basically it was just a headline made for Fox News, and, it deserves mention and ridicule. How she will, enforce immigration at the border. Now, we're talking about southern border immigration. I don't think South Dakota necessarily has, as much to worry about with this as, say, border states might have. But it is true that a fairly significant immigrant population for South Dakota, for the size of the population already in South Dakota, does make its way there. But of course, that's all because they find work there. There's no reason otherwise for migrants, legal or otherwise, whatever terms we're using these days, to continue all the way to South Dakota. There's really very little reason to continue all the way to South Dakota for permanent settlement for a lot of people, but okay. If you make your way across the southern United States border and then keep going all the way to South Dakota, it's probably because there's a pretty good chance that you're going to land a job there. So the enforcement mechanism really, of course, has to be leaning on businesses in South Dakota. But, of course, Kristi Noem is running as a Republican, so that part of the equation is going to be ignored. Also problematic for her is her ability to enforce any kind of restrictions on movement in and out of South Dakota, for good reason or bad. She says she's, what's her quote was, they're not going to find a place here in South Dakota, she says, of undocumented migrants. Then, of course, that is all true unless they arrive in August on the back of a Harley Davidson, in which case, come on in, and no matter what you're carrying, you're welcome here. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's see, other brief items in the news today, according to The Hill. Marjorie Taylor Greene challenging Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to a debate over the Green New Deal. There is a whole article that goes along with it. I don't know if it's worth delving into, but, lots of people obviously observing quite obviously, very little point, obviously, in debating anything with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I suppose what are the rules of the debate? Like if I say the Green New Deal is a great idea because X, Y, and Z objective measures of something, and you get to say, well, I think it's a bad idea because Jewish space lasers are going to roast us all to death anyway, and they're the ones causing climate change anyhow, to the extent that it's really even true and not a hoax. All right, debate over. Like at that point, is there any, obviously. And then of course, just the sort of pathetic, go-to attack thing. Like I need to look reasonable and not crazy anymore. All right, well, the only thing I know how to do, because, I don't have any policy ideas or know anything about how policy is made. Even being a member of Congress, I have no experience with because I don't serve on any committees. That's usually where this debate might take place, but she's not on any committees. But this is the right-wing online pundit version of, the only other thing that there is to do is challenge someone to a debate. And you're not in any position to challenge anybody into anything, and they don't have to accept anything. And the debate subject or the debate forum is like, it's a non-existent thing. We don't have any forum where policy is routinely debated, well, certainly not between backbenchers in Congress. And why anybody, even if it did exist, why anybody would agree to a debate that somebody can just, bail out of by saying aliens are controlling your brain, clearly not, worth doing. I'm sort of curious just to take a look at the Hill's write-up on it, just to see what in the world do they even cover, right? Like, is it just, once you get past, well, she made this challenge, what do you say? Like that it's a serious idea or that it would be worth talking to her about anything? The big challenge, this is all you have to do, I guess, to get in the newspaper these days, comes via Twitter. Like, obviously no one... You hardly ever see anybody going to the official Federal Registry of Debates and filling out the paperwork anymore. So, okay, what does she say? AOC, I'd like to challenge you to a debate on the Green New Deal economic policy. Since you sponsored the Green New Deal and have a degree in economics, I'm sure you are more than qualified. Which is probably true, but I mean, like, suppose you get a challenge from a Dalmatian. Do you debate the Dalmatian? No, probably not. Not really going to be worth your time. And even if Marjorie Taylor Greene were eminently qualified to have that debate, it's just, I'm from Georgia, you're from New York, we're both backbenchers, what the debate happens where? U.S. debating arena number 7. It's just a dumb thing. And, the province of street corner cranks, usually, more than anything else. Let's see. So this is a challenge to the debate. Green said that with her degree in business administration, does she have one? Okay. And experience running a company, yeah. Can we be honest about that? Should we even bother with it? I mean, her dad had a construction company, and then he sold that to her. And for whatever reason, she also decided, I also am going to invest in opening my own CrossFit gym, which I guess means, 1, I love CrossFit, and 2, this construction company I bought isn't keeping me very busy for some unknown reason. That probably somebody with a good degree, who did well as a business administration student would be able to tell you what's the reason and maybe what's the cure if you wanted to be busier as a construction executive. But, really you wanted to work out in gyms. And also, by the way, the reason she started, as far as I can make out, the reason she started her own CrossFit gym was she wanted to work at someone else's CrossFit gym and no one would let her. So she extracted some money from the company she bought from her dad and said, I'll use that to set up a CrossFit gym, which may or may not make any profit, but at least I'll be the boss of my CrossFit gym. And then no one can tell me how to do a chin-up. Anyway, so, what's the rest of her proposal is she and Ocasio-Cortez could each pick a moderator. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, like that there would be 2 moderators. They're going to have bipartisan moderation, or they could each nominate a moderator. And then what? America votes. Dial 1-800-NEW-COKE or whatever and register your vote for who should moderate this debate. And the answer is whoever will build a trapdoor over an alligator pit underneath Marjorie Taylor Greene's podium. The debate would be on major news network negotiated between the two, Greene said. Oh, sure. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene said, major television network. Oh, it's going to be a major television network. It's a major award. It's a major television network. She just declares it to be true, and CBS says, yes, idiot space laser lady will get airtime from us. Is there any more to this? I'm just curious what other dumb things you come up with. Greene proposed charging people to watch the debate. Oh, yes. There's that master's is your master's or undergraduate in business administration. Again, there's the business administration training coming through. Everyone wants to see this. And said that the money raised could be split between us for our choosing of where it goes, which is a funny way of saying the charity of your choice, because, of course, she has no intention to give the money to charity. This is a child's idea of how to hold a policy debate or a debate of any kind. And what can I tell you? Let's see. Green, nothing else. Yeah, the rest of it here is about how she's a jackass and is now essentially a famous YouTuber who's able to raise money to run for Congress. Okay, so there you have it. Wonderful story. She's such a genius. And I don't know, sometimes it pays to look into it. I guess to the extent that The Hill is covering it as a serious challenge, whereas they had the facts in front of them. I haven't gathered any further facts beyond, well, I guess we have read some other things about her. But anyway, we haven't done any more reporting about it than The Hill has. But The Hill had the opportunity here to say, idiot on street corner yells at cloud, challenges it to non-existent debate. But because there are members of Congress involved, they decided to make like there was a real chance that a major news network would air the debate and you could charge people. Like, when was the last time that happened? CBS is going to put it on the air, and everybody just has to, there's going to be some federal agency is going to make sure everybody pays up, and then they'll split the money, and you can do whatever you want with it. I don't know. Like I said, a child's idea of how this would work. I suppose it could happen, but the debate would have to happen online, and then there would be a structure for charging people. But otherwise, putting it on a major network is more or less incompatible with charging people to see it. But there you go. That's the extent to which Marjorie Taylor Greene has thought through this stupid thing. It should never get an article, I guess, is really what I'm saying in the end. All right, well, let's see. There are, of course, a couple other things not only parked in Pocket and in my Twitter feed, but in your Twitter feeds that you've sent through and thankfully tagged with the KITM hashtag, which helps us get a hold of these things. Rebecca Romans also sent a second prompt to us besides the new polling from Navigator that Greg picked up on. What do we have here? A tweet that she forwards us from Andrew L. Seidel. I suppose we should open it up here so we can. Oh, wow. I clicked on something and it moved it to a weird place. Andrew Seidel, who are you? He is an attorney. There you go. There's more, but he says he defends the First Amendment, which is a nice thing to do. Author of The Founding Myth. There you are. That's something that you can latch onto. And let's see. What he had to say that was of interest to Rebecca was, there's a whole tweet thread here. If our democracy is to survive. Yes, okay. This brings us to another subject. This helps us clear out an article that was in the Pocket Q as well. Good. If our democracy is to survive, he argues here, we must, hashtag, ready for this hashtag, expand the court. Yes, word comes finally of some movement, nothing substantive, but members of Congress finally now speaking out loud now that Joe Biden is in the White House and we have, nominal control of both chambers of Congress. Not enough to do what they're proposing necessarily, but delivering on the promise of some pre-election discussion of the idea of expanding specifically the Supreme Court and probably all the other circuit courts as well. So, all right, if our democracy is to survive, he says we must expand the court. Speaking directly here to a bill sponsored by, and including the tweet of Congressman Mondaire Jones. Do I have the pronunciation of his first name correct? I'm not certain that I do, but one of the newly elected members proposing just that we expand the Supreme Court. The bill, Mr. Seidel here says, adds 4 seats to the Supreme Court, so that would bring us to 13. The number of justices would equal the number of circuit courts. This is interesting and important, which is historically where Congress has set the number. Our courts are already packed, and this is about correction. We've had those discussions, but an interesting point here, and I think we've maybe even mentioned it in the past. Yeah, it used to be that there was it didn't always correspond to a justice coming from, like hometown, coming from within the boundaries of that district, although that would be an interesting prospect all by itself. But the number there used to be a connection between the number of justices on the Supreme Court and the number of circuit courts, they used to be judicial circuits, but now they're just our courts of appeal. But and there used to be a more important correspondence between the justices and the circuits. They really used to be like old-time judicial circuits. Why do we call them circuit courts? You want to know a little bit about that? I wonder if a more cogent explanation can be had via Wikipedia. But basically, in the olden days, you used to have judges actually, and justices, but judges riding the circuit. That is to say, they were traveling judges, and you were assigned a certain circuit that you would ride, literally on your horse, through this. And, I'm going to be at this court on this day, and this court on this day, and this court. And back in the day, there was, I'm sure there was backlog, but they had, it was enough to have a judge who would actually do this way. And, your days come around, and finally there can be some administration of justice in your neck of the woods. And back then, when we didn't have the size of the population that we've got now, and didn't have the same criminal and civil caseload, that was an adequate way of handling it. And even in the early days of the Republic, Supreme Court justices rode the circuit. Here we are. Let's go to the Wikipedia page about it. The United States Circuit Courts were the original intermediate level courts of the United States federal court system. They were established by the Judiciary Act of 1789, that established everything, except for the Supreme Court, which was constitutionally established. They had trial court jurisdiction, originally, over civil suits of diversity jurisdiction and major federal crimes. They also had appellate jurisdiction over the United States district courts. That's chiefly what they do now, really only what they do now. The Judiciary Act of 1891 transferred their appellate jurisdiction to the newly created United States Circuit Courts of Appeal, which are now known as United States Courts of Appeals. January 1st, 1912, the effective date of the Judicial Code of 1911, the court circuits were abolished, with their remaining trial court jurisdiction transferred to the U.S. district courts. During the 100 years that the justices of the Supreme Court, quote, air quotes here, rode circuit, many justices complained about the effort required. Riding circuit took a great deal of time, about half the year, and was both physically demanding and dangerous. However, members of Congress held firm to the belief that circuit riding benefited the justices and the populace, and they turned a deaf ear to the corps of justices that desired to abolish the practice. The Judiciary Act of 1869 established a separate circuit court and allowed the hiring of judges specifically to handle the cases, but the act required that Supreme Court justices had to ride circuit once every 2 years. However, this came to a final end in 1891 when the Circuit Courts of Appeals Act was passed. Okay, so it makes for interesting history. And yeah, that's a kind of an interesting idea that back in the day, the members of Congress thought it was important, I guess, by way of connecting these high-minded justices of the Supreme Court to the realities of civil and criminal litigation on the ground at the at the territorial level, the circuit level. You need to stay connected to that. You need to you're not just some ivory tower intellectual justices disconnected from the real administration of justice out there among the populace. Of course, you are now, but they weren't supposed to be then. But even then, I guess they kind of hated it. It's sort of interesting. And so that, I guess, is why there was this more direct connection. If you have 9 judicial circuits, you got to have 9 justices. But that sort of got disconnected, I think, fairly early. Well, maybe it was right after they disconnected the circuit riding responsibilities from the justices. Anyway, in the meantime, the court hasn't expanded, even though the number of judicial circuit courts of appeal has expanded because our population has expanded. And so, yeah, you don't have to require necessarily that they go and be personally responsible for each of these circuits in order to expand the number of justices on the court. But I guess it's a way to throw back to the history of things and remind everybody, even though, I think we've discussed the fact that the number of justices on the Supreme Court has changed several times, but that doesn't seem to be convincing enough people. But to bring back the history and the connection between the circuits and the Supreme Court, it might not be a bad idea. All right, well, let's see. Is there much more to that? Andrew Seidel continues with his comments. Want a good example of how the courts have been packed? Sure, why not? The Arkansas House just passed a clearly unconstitutional bill that puts creationism in public schools, partly because, as the sponsor said, we have different members of the Supreme Court now. That is an interesting point, right? The idea that you can legislate things that you know that to date have been considered clearly unconstitutional, but that, well, everybody's just been wrong about that. This is something we've been discussing for a long time. Armando always gets into these discussions. It's just, I guess you can't argue too much. It is kind of legal realism, right? The Arkansas Supreme Court, despite the fact, as Rebecca observes, they don't even care about the ye old Constitution, right? It's not that they don't care about the Constitution. It's that they know that the Constitution gives the Supreme Court the authority pretty much to do whatever they want, unreviewed and unreviewable. And it's simply an acknowledgement that the nature of the 9 that make up the Supreme Court is different now, and they might rule in ways that the rest of us always thought were just improper, upside down, and wrong, and came to believe that because prior Supreme Courts said, when considering things on, let's say, a less ideological basis, we imagine, perhaps, we like to think that that's the case, came to a very different conclusion. But now there are ideologues on the Supreme Court, and they'll decide differently. But that's the system we built for ourselves somehow. And on the other hand, I guess it's worth mentioning that part of the system we built for ourselves is one that allows Congress to change the size and makeup of the Supreme Court, and they should go ahead and do it. I don't think they have anything near the votes that they'll need to do it, primarily because, of course, the bill can be filibustered at the moment, anyway, in the Senate, and the margins are pretty close, actually, in both houses. So it's not something to look for passing anytime real soon. But on the other hand, there's good reason to lobby for it in inclusion in, infrastructure, I guess, is one way of looking at it. But I mean, not to put it in the infrastructure bill so much as to include it as part of the infrastructure of overhauling our democratic practices such that we can avoid everything that we've come to understand as our constitutional regime being erased by ideologues planted on the Supreme Court for that particular purpose. Not only that, but of course gerrymandering away the ability to have fair elections, giving away the ability to govern the country fairly by preserving the filibuster and the malapportionment of the Senate, and so many more things that stand in the way of actually reflecting the will of the people. But actually, something that came up the other day, and I think if I scroll back a little further in my KITM hashtag, I'll find it. And if I remember correctly, I might even be looking for something from our good friend and continued correspondent Patrick Snyder. Was it you who sent me this thing? There was, I don't know. Now I can't recall exactly where it came from. But somebody had recently sent me a reminder of the issue of the expansion, not only of the Supreme Court, but that we're more than overdue for an expansion in the size of the House of Representatives, something we've discussed on the show before, and that our having artificially capped it at 435 members for whatever reason and frozen it in place. The size of the House, of course, has changed in the past as well, something that we're not at all constitutionally wedded to. But that by capping it at 435, it also contributes to malapportionment of representation in the House. Where did that come from? I'm pretty sure that I had seen it in the last couple of days. Anyway, regardless of whether it actually came from Patrick Snyder, we owe him some time as well, as he's made a couple of great contributions to the list of topics for the show. Let's see if we can scroll back. There are a couple that we've missed for a few days now. Let's see. Okay. Well, we'll start on this one. How about this? One backgrounder that we haven't discussed, but that many of you probably have heard about already, on what's going on with the Dante Wright situation. Patrick Snyder sending us this, well, along with the comment that this is massively effed up, and I think that's probably about as good a comment as we can make on it. Sending me, let's see, a tweet thread from Elizabeth McLaughlin. Let's bring up the bio here so we can get some sense of who we're talking to. Founder of the Gaia Project for Women's Leadership. Okay. And of interest here is this situation. The warrant for Dante Wright's arrest. And of course, that's what he was being arrested over, allegedly. Right? There was a traffic stop, and then they said, we're arresting you because there's an outstanding warrant for your arrest. And then trouble breaks out, and, well, you know the rest of the story. But it's the story behind so many of these unjustified police shootings, that police justify not only the stop, but the shooting by saying, well, there was a warrant out for their arrest, which makes them sound like, this is a known criminal, and known criminals are dangerous people. And that's why we had guns out, and that's why we were making an arrest. That's why we were panicking. That's why we were on edge. So here's a little bit of background on that, which she begins by commenting on this. This is effing awful, and it is. The warrant that they were using here, the warrant for Dante Wright's arrest, was essentially issued incorrectly. The warrant was issued because the cops sent a prior notice for a court appearance. I guess he was under bench warrant for arrest because of failure to appear for another judicial proceeding. Now, he failed to appear because the notice that he needed to appear was sent to the wrong address. The court ends up not knowing that and says, well, the guy's not here, so now there's a bench warrant for his arrest to compel his attendance at this proceeding, which he avoided last time. But, of course, it's easy to understand how you would miss notice of that if they didn't actually mail you one. But there you have it. The tweet that McLaughlin is referring to is now, for some reason, unavailable. Let me see if I can open it up in the web-based browser. Maybe that'll help make it more obvious. Sometimes that'll bring up the post. Let's see. Although it could be, yeah. All right, so that post, for whatever reason, is now gone. But there's more to McLaughlin's discussion here. It is impossible not to be enraged and devastated by what's happening to black people at the hands of police. Then, of course, a discussion that, I guess, takes note of the sensitivity of the defund, right, issue. And she puts it this way: divest from policing instead. Very different. Okay. But apparently the story covered on many of our favorite progressive programs on television and radio. So anyway, just wanted to throw that one out there. That is kind of heartbreaking that the whole thing begins with a mistake, and these mistakes just compound and build on themselves as long as we empower the cops to think that they can do basically whatever they want if they're dealing with a dangerous criminal. And then, of course, they just extrapolate from that. If I'm not dealing with a dangerous criminal, can I do whatever I want? Yes, you can, if you claim you felt like you were dealing with a dangerous criminal, or that person might be, or you mistook them for a dangerous criminal. Enormous problem, continuing problem, and one that they're contributing to because it helps them get away with things and escape liability when they are occasionally brought into court and held to account for their actions. Well, he felt dangerous, or I had reason to believe he was dangerous, or I created reason to believe he was dangerous, and then it turns out that the whole thing was a mistake from the beginning. There's more, of course, and more reports, by the way, from our listeners on how they're doing with their vaccines. Can we toss that in there as well? Let's see. I know I put a few of these things away. Oh, no. Let's see if we can do it before the music plays us out. Our latest, should I read everybody's name? I don't know if I have permission from people, but another saying a little bit of minor soreness in the arm from a Moderna first dose. Thanks, Shelley, for telling us about that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on F-Roots Radio. Did we get that one in before the break? I won't call out the full name because I don't have permission, even though I think that people just want to share their stories. But we'll just say Shelley. Thanks very much for chiming in on that. Again, Moderna, is that the pronunciation we're going with these days? Her first dose brings us to minor soreness in the arm, nasty little headache that night and part of the day after. Second dose coming. So very good, and good luck with that one. I hope it goes, a little bit better for you. Also, our friend and frequent correspondent, Matt Rigdon, reporting Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I bet you felt really great after getting that news the other day, but everything's fine so far. Arm sore after the shot. And then, I guess a salt lick joke. I licked it just now, and it tastes salty. So got his doctoring advice from Dr. Ed once again. But seems to be in good spirits. So fingers crossed for all of you that your side effects are minimized. But wanted to make sure that everybody who was participating in our informal survey was recognized. Let's see. All right, we got that one done. There was some more. What else do we have here? I think that there are a couple more. Oh, yes, more news. How about this? Happier news. Keeping up to date on these things. Adam McGinnis, whose story we selected for inclusion the other day. Now, is this a direct effect from it? Should I just be reading all of your story suggestions? Joins us as a Patreon contributor. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Adam. As we do with everybody here. We're slowly growing our community here, and that wouldn't be the it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It would be one of the best things in the world, really, if there was some connection between our sharing your stories and your feeling invested in the show and the community of the show. That would be pretty much how it's supposed to work, I guess. I think fair game there. So anyway, welcome to the ranks of our Patreon contributors. We always appreciate that. Other stories that I wanted to share. This is an interesting one. Again, from a couple of days ago, and I think you probably heard bits and pieces of it. Again, suggested by Patrick Snyder, sending us Shannon Watts' tweet about the bankruptcy trial for the NRA. We are all excited, of course, to know about the NRA's bankruptcy, and it has revealed some very interesting things about the structure of their operation. I think probably you may have heard in the last couple of days news about NRA. Is he president, CEO, both? What's his title there? the NRA. But Wayne LaPierre is the guy we're talking about. And I don't know how they structure their chief executive. Okay, so CEO of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre. But he made a minor news splash from this trial. I guess the fact that came out that after the 1214, as they call it, the 1214 shootings at the Sandy Hook elementary school, that for whatever reason I don't know whether it was was he actually worried about his own safety, or did he just want to retreat from the world of the bad news because people were coming down on him, quite understandably, in the wake of this shooting, and he retreats to his luxury yacht where he feels safe. And of course, the rest of the world feeling wounded and vulnerable over this shooting, and he's taking advantage of the ability to retreat to his world of wealth and privilege instead. But the fuller story, reported from the New York Times just a few days ago, April 11th, also very interesting, just in terms of, the continuing corruption and grift of conservative world. NRA chief takes a stand with cracks in his armor. Wayne LaPierre has led the National Rifle Association for 30 years, but his implacable image looked threadbare in bankruptcy court. As most things it's probably part of the idea to make them look threadbare when you're in bankruptcy court. But here's the deal from, thank you, President Biden. Here's the deal. Danny Hakim and Mary Williams Walsh reporting for the New York Times. For 3 decades, as you know, as the subheader told us, Wayne LaPierre has been the implacable face of the gun lobby, a scourge of the left who argued that giving ground on gun control was akin to giving up on America. So it was remarkable to see the shambolic turn his tenure atop the NRA has taken, showcased last week in federal bankruptcy court in Dallas. Mr. LaPierre acknowledged that he had secretly taken the NRA into bankruptcy without telling even his top lieutenants or most of his board, essentially as an end run around attacks from the New York Attorney General, who was seeking to shut down the group amid charges of financial mismanagement and corruption. And he made a string of admissions that served largely to underscore the NRA's disarray and the questions about his own fitness to lead it. Before I go any further, I'll just say that when Patrick sent us this one via Shannon Watts tweeting about it, you know her, of course, as, what's the name of her? The founder of Moms Demand, right? The gun safety advocates in every town, etc., etc. Shannon's comment on the story being, as we got ready for week 2 of the NRA's bankruptcy trial, here's a thread recapping what we know and what we don't. One thing is clear. The NRA saw bankruptcy as a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it's looking more and more like a catastrophic mistake. So that's a very interesting context in which to read on. Right, so again, he does it essentially in secret, directs the NRA to claim bankruptcy without telling anybody. But what about this idea of his own fitness to lead the organization? He didn't know, he testified, that his former chief financial officer had received a $360,000 a year consulting contract after leaving under a cloud. That's some cloud that they left under. He didn't know, he says, that the personal travel agent that the NRA had hired to book charter flights for him and his family. The Bahamas was a favorite destination, by the way. The importance of lobbying for the NRA in the Bahamas cannot be understated. He didn't know that they were, or he says he didn't know, that they were charging a 10% booking fee on top of a retainer that they already charged that could reach $26,000 a month. He didn't know that one of his former top lieutenants had arranged for his wife to be hired by an NRA contractor. I didn't know what she was doing. She's just my wife. Or that her compensation had been billed back to the NRA. And he didn't fire his personal assistant after it was discovered that she had diverted $40,000 to pay for her son's wedding and other personal expenses. I didn't know any of this was happening because I'm so hyper aware of what I'm doing. Okay, Yet, if the central takeaway in Dallas was one of a once mighty organization and its chief executive on their heels, the enduring power of the movement Mr. LaPierre and the NRA have built was on full display 1,300 miles away in Washington. On Thursday, while Mr. LaPierre was appearing in bankruptcy court via video link, President Biden was in the White House Rose Garden lamenting the international embarrassment of American gun violence, most recently visible in mass shootings in Georgia, Colorado, and South Carolina. Then he offered a relatively thin gruel of gun control measures achievable through executive action, given that more far-reaching measures like universal background checks or an assault weapons ban were unlikely in an era with a narrowly divided Senate and filibuster rules still in effect. We've got a long way to go. It seems like we've always have a long way to go, the president said. And, yes, very interesting. How about that? It made me think about all the abuses of the funds, about all the people who, pay their lifetime memberships or continuing memberships or pay fees essentially to the NRA every time they buy a gun, and the number of states that have codified the requirement that you pay the NRA in order to take the training that's necessary to get the permit that you want. And in that sense, I guess that's the only sense in which I think the idea of adopting constitutional carry, as the gun enthusiasts like to call it, that it's permitless carrying of weapons and purchasing of weapons, might actually be a good idea. It's a great way to sort of defund at least some part of the NRA's operation, although it appears that they've defunded their own operation just by stealing all the money. Imagine. But, I guess they just figured this is an endless stream of money, so we can be corrupt because no one will miss the money if we steal it for our kids' weddings, etc. All right. Weakened by internal strife and after an attenuated presence in the 2020 presidential election, the NRA these days often seems more fixated on litigation than guns. Among other things, it has spent nearly $8 million in legal fees to do battle with its former top lobbyist, Chris Cox. The Attorney General's office claimed, even though Mr. Cox is seeking a little over a quarter of that amount in a severance dispute. So, paying him off would have been cheaper, but okay. On principle, you're going to fight. A lawyer for the NRA's main outside firm called the figures misleading, but didn't provide a breakdown. But perhaps the NRA's greatest power remains the perception of its power. Mr. LaPierre, now 71, has succeeded in embedding an aggressively uncompromising message on guns into Republican orthodoxy, and the group, though diminished, remains a lobbying force. The gun debate now plays out most fiercely at the state level, where an invigorated gun control movement is passing new restrictions in blue states, like a recent tightening of background checks in Maryland, while more red states are making it easier to carry guns without a permit, as Tennessee moved to do last week. With Wayne's leadership, the NRA has always been a grassroots organization, said Todd Rathner, a lobbyist and NRA board member. Of course, he means he's stealing money from the grassroots, but that's a good thing in Republican eyes, I'm sure. Anyway, that's what, Todd Rathner said here, adding that the group has been adept at educating gun owners on how to pick those candidates who best support their rights. They pose with guns. That's how you know. Its political muscle is felt most keenly in Republican congressional primaries, where candidates jockey to outdo each other on Second Amendment's bona fides, or bona fides, I guess, if you want to go with that pronunciation. I like the Americanized version. It's fun. Those primaries sort out who has the purest Second Amendment DNA and who doesn't, Mr. Rathner said. But Mr. LaPierre himself has been in retreat, less visible than he once was, and he testified, living under incredible threat. He has found refuge on 2 luxurious yachts, Illusions and Grand Illusion, owned by an NRA contractor. The 2 Illusions, Grand and Regular, as James Sheehan, a senior lawyer in the Attorney General's office, put it, though the more humbly named Illusions has 4 staterooms and 2 jet skis. The yachts were often in the Bahamas, where Mr. LaPierre also stayed at the Atlantis Resort in Paradise Island, or in Europe, where he said he needed to recruit celebrities. Sure. Very important job, right? I'm sure that helped a lot of grassroots gun owners by doing that. Okay. And of course, living under incredible threat. There's no such thing as incredible threat. If you're a gun owner, you're safe. Carolyn Meadows, the NRA's president, that's the answer to that question, described Mr. LaPierre as a reformer in a statement for this article, saying he has unapologetically pursued a course correction. Declaring bankruptcy is it. On the stand, LaPierre comes across as an antiquated, absent-minded professor. He describes himself as unapologetically old school. He doesn't use a computer, preferring yellow legal pads. He does not text. He started reading emails on his phone only in the last couple of months. His answer in court, or answers, wandered so frequently that he was often interrupted and implored to keep his focus by opposing counsel, as well as the presiding judge, Harlan D. Hale. That's not Harlan, whatever. What was his name? Yeah, I already forgot the name of the terrible consultant we mentioned yesterday when we read that he was now spokesperson for Matt Gaetz. Oh, opposing counsel is telling me to stay on topic now. Let's see. Here's one example. Mr. LaPierre, it's rare that I'm going to interrupt you, but stick to yeses and nos if possible. One of his lawyers, Gregory Garman, interjected during his testimony. Mr. LaPierre is seeking to use bankruptcy to help reincorporate the NRA in the more gun-friendly state of Texas, and has already repaid the NRA about $300,000 as he seeks to hold on to his job. Asked if he was disciplined for misspending the money, he said, yes, I was disciplined. I paid it back, suggesting that at the NRA, discipline sometimes amounts to paying back money after you are caught. Yeah, that's not disciplining. That's just fairness. Anyway, whether his bankruptcy gambit will work remains to be seen. To persuade Judge Hale that the NRA's petition should be rejected during a trial that started last week, lawyers for the Attorney General, Letitia James, and for a major creditor, the NRA's former advertising firm, Ackerman McQueen, presented evidence that they said showed that Mr. LaPierre had sought bankruptcy protection in bad faith. What do you know? Bad faith from a conservative. Proving that a filing was made in bad faith can be difficult because it means showing intent. But Monica Connell, an assistant attorney general, argued that Mr. LaPierre lacked the authority to take the NRA into bankruptcy on his own and had used a convoluted ploy to get its board of directors to unwittingly grant the necessary authorization. Rather than putting a bankruptcy resolution before the board, Ms. Connell said, Mr. LaPierre's team asked the board to vote on a new employment contract for him. It looked like a reform measure since it reduced his golden parachute. That's a good thing, but then I guess it was cover for something. The contract contained an inconspicuous provision, like the mouse type at the bottom of the opt-out checkbox from the Trump team, right? An inconspicuous provision giving Mr. LaPierre authority, quote, without limitation, to, quote, reorganize or restructure the affairs of the association for purposes of cost minimization, regulatory compliance, or otherwise. It's a big word, otherwise. The new contract was first presented to a committee of the NRA board in a closed session on January 7th. There weren't even enough copies to go around, and no one could leave with a copy. NRA officials said board members had ample time for review. By that time, Mr. LaPierre's main outside counsel, the law firm of William A. Brewer III, had spent months planning the bankruptcy, racking up millions of dollars in legal fees. Charge all the bankrupt people as much money as you can, I guess. But no one told the board about that. After the committee emerged from its closed session, the board approved the contract with little inkling that they had conferred bankruptcy authority on Mr. LaPierre. When the petition was filed a week later, one board member said he was so shocked that this is a quote, his head almost exploded, which is a real possibility probably around the NRA headquarters. They have had accidental shootings there in the past. This, according to Brian Mason, an Ackerman lawyer, in his opening statement, That board member, Philip Journey, a family court judge in Kansas, had asked Judge Hale to allow the bankruptcy to continue, but to hire an examiner who would work for the court to find and, quote, eradicate any mismanagement. Good luck. Another person caught unawares by the filing was the NRA's general counsel. That's bad. John Fraser. Mr. LaPierre conceded in court that he had also not told the NRA's chief financial officer or its top lobbyist. You might be able to forgive the lobbyist, but I didn't tell the general counsel, the lawyer, or our CFO about bankruptcy. Really. There's a real question whether the employment contract was a legitimate authorization for bankruptcy, says David A. Skeel, a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania who studies bankruptcy. The language is quite vague. It could be construed as simply allowing Wayne LaPierre to make cost-saving organizational changes, not to file a bankruptcy petition. Of course, he's probably arguing this is a cost-saving organizational change. I'm reorganizing the company in bankruptcy. But yeah, I agree. He's right. A little too vague. He also said that corporate law does not normally permit boards to delegate bankruptcy decisions to a single officer or committee. NRA officials said that the board voted weeks after the filing in March to approve the bankruptcy, and that board members should have known that the language in the employment agreement meant LaPierre could declare bankruptcy unilaterally. But during the proceedings last week, G. Michael Gruber, a lawyer for Ackerman, asked LaPierre if board members were in a better position to understand the meaning of your employment agreement as far as it allowing you to file a Chapter 11 petition than, say, the general counsel of the NRA? No, Mr. LaPierre replied. The trial, it says in this piece from April 11th, resumes this week, which I guess it's probably still underway, having resumed. I guess this was Sunday. So I guess it is back underway this week, and we didn't have to correct for the passage of time in that. All right, let's see. That's a couple of good stories there. Thanks to you, Patrick, for sending those along. There's still more in the Twitter thread, but let's see what else is in pocket just to make sure that we're dealing with everything we meant to get to earlier today. Let's see. Okay. This interesting note, too. I'll direct you over to the Morning Digest over at Daily Kos. I did see someone commenting on this yesterday. Former Republican governor of North Carolina, running now, I guess, jumping into the Senate candidacy, right, trying to succeed Richard Burr in his retirement from the Senate. But Pat McCrory, who got himself in trouble and then bounced from office over the infamous bathroom bill. The last time that Republican state legislatures tried meddling in people's, inspecting people's genitalia, got himself bounced from office. He says he's not only running for Senate, but launching his bid as a, quote, outsider. This was in the headline of the piece. Former GOP governor launches North Carolina Senate bid as outsider. No, really. So, yeah, we may have to redefine what being an outsider means if you are a statewide elected official seeking statewide office. Federal office, but voted on statewide. Just, interesting. Words don't have meaning or anything like that. Interesting twist on how things are going there. Let's see. Everything I've saved in Pocket is sort of saved hidden behind, it's changed the way that it files things, and it no longer shows me what's the content of the page that I've saved in certain platforms, and just tells me the source here. Okay, so more about Matt Gaetz and his varying problems here. Let's see. All right, I think we actually might be done with the things that I had set aside from early this morning. Here's another little tidbit here. I'm going to open these things up one at a time. Got to find a new system, I guess. Maybe this is the end of Pocket's usefulness for me for anything other than links to news sites. Any tweets just really don't reveal their contents. Jake Lobin, one of many people, just sort of our random friendly citizen, noting for us that the Senate voted the other day on an anti-Asian hate crimes bill, essentially a response to the most unwelcome wave of violence against Asian Americans or those of Asian and Pacific Island origin, being targeted largely because, of course, the last idiot guy who occupied the presidency spent so much of his time trying to get Americans to blame Chinese, in particular, people, but Asians were, of all sorts, ended up being the targets because people are kind of dumb and they take any excuse for violence against minorities and others. But at any rate, yes, lots of people taking out the blame for the coronavirus pandemic on them, and that there were actually 6 senators who were willing to vote no on a bill that would, I don't know, actually remember the dynamics of the bill and what actually happens, but clearly that there would be it bothered them that there should be a federal response to this growing problem of violence against Asian Americans. Here is your rogues gallery of idiots who actually voted against it. Your usual suspects: Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, who everyone hates anyway, Josh Hawley, who everyone also hates, Roger Marshall of Kansas, who it turns out everybody hates, but nobody knows who he is, Tommy Tuberville, like Tuberville, is that right? The dumbest guy, the football coach from Alabama who ended up in the Senate because Alabama apparently is the kind of place where you can say it's something like a football coach, yeah, let's put him in the U.S. Senate, and it makes sense. And Rand Paul, who we've known as a jerk ass and a dummy for quite a long time. So, okay, just wanted to get that on the record there. Those 6 are, they were targeted for defeat by almost all of you. I'm sure every single one of you really listening to the program anyway. So no changes in your plans. I just thought I would bring it to your attention. All right, let's see. Other couple items here. I think we can still keep scrolling down and getting back to other suggestions about stories that we may have missed. I think there's still some more waiting in the wings here, but didn't park them all, or some of those that I did, in fact, park in Pocket are no longer immediately visible to us, of course, because of the change in the way Pocket is displaying them to us. At any rate, we're actually running up against our end of the show at this point anyway, so probably no room to sneak anything else substantive in. But all right, I think we got a bunch of those things in here. How about one random item? We can do that before we start up the music and tell you about what's coming up next on the show. Civil War humor. I didn't even realize that this was a genre, much less a Twitter feed, but someone who still finds humor in the Civil War, and I guess there's some to be found, tweets this one. I still tell this story every year as kind of a moral parable, but it doesn't seem to sink in, so here we go again, America, if you want to laugh at somebody at their expense. They're dead, so don't worry about it. Here we go again. It's time to hear how the fire-breathing secessionist Roger Pryor almost became the first casualty of the war thanks to his own breathtaking stupidity. Would you like to hear about that? Or would you like to read it for yourself? Well, I'll read you a little bit about it. Pryor, who is inevitably described as a fiery orator, even though he has the same dead-eyed stare of the soulless as Tucker Carlson, was asked to take the first shot on Fort Sumter, but actually turned it down, saying, I could not fire the first gun of the war. I wonder on what principle he came to that conclusion. Anyway, the next day, while visiting Sumter to negotiate the federal surrender, Pryor saw a bottle on the table and, being full of swagger, I guess a manly man, took a swig. A Union surgeon approached him and said, "Sir, what you have drunk is poison. It was iodine of potassium, and you are a dead man." Hashtag oops. Pryor commenced to collapse on the spot, as one does after unwittingly drinking a bunch of poison. And for a long few seconds, the Union guys stood around and put their hands in their pockets and whistled nonchalantly and were like, "So, how do you like the socks this year?" But finally, a Union surgeon grabbed the stomach pump and presumably some activated charcoal and saline, plus all the cigarettes and orange slices Pryor could handle. What? Okay. Not that I've ever been admitted to a chill-out tent at a rock show, but seriously, stay hydrated, kids, says Civil War humor. Anyway, some of us, Abner Doubleday wrote later, questioned the doctor's right to interpose himself in a matter of this kind. After all, if any rebel leader chose to come over to Fort Sumter and poison himself, the medical department had no business to intervene. But with the Union doctor's aid, the rebel fire breather recovered to become a laughably inept general in the Confederate Army. He got captured later on and thrown in jail before being released by Lincoln and playing no further part in the war. Isn't that interesting?
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about this? Just to follow up, after the war, he pulled a reverse carpetbagger and moved to New York City, becoming a prominent lost causer. Guess what he blamed the war on? Those dastardly fire-breathing secessionist politicians. But not like him. Anyway, all right, a historical note without telling you what's coming up next, but stay tuned because it's justice.